Great. So we're here now with Rob Del Pino, who is our lighting designer and set man extraordinaire. And what we're going to talk about today is the work you did in preparing for the Dutch Courtesan. And what I thought we could talk about to start with is your working relationship and how you work with Jambi Brown, our designer, and the model that she provided, and then how you used that for the set and lighting design.
Right, yeah. Well, I mean, I was sort of involved with the whole process fairly early on with Mike, and was privy to the initial meetings that we had with Jambi. And we were invited to Scarborough to see what would have been, I guess, the secondary concept of the design, which was a model box made out of pieces of what looked like I don't know, cocktail sticks. I think they were a bit bigger than cocktail sticks actually, and that was the first sort of idea of building the whole structure out of scaffolding, and from that afternoon the prospect of having a set that was, the whole idea of this show was Dutch Courtesan 2013 plus 20 years sort of thing. So the idea of Jacobean buildings, of Tudor style buildings, but how that sort of tied in with scaffolding designs and the angles and 45-degree angles of how everything supported it sort of owed itself to the sort of architecture of the time. And so from that point onwards I started to realise that actually this would be quite an exciting project to light. So Jambi had then discussed how she wanted the structures to be actually covered. Part of my role, as well as lighting designer, I was also sort of kind of production manager and set constructor as well. So I had the possibility of investigating what sort of materials we were going to cover the set with, and so I found this what's called a debris net, which is used in scaffolding, just to stop pieces of debris falling from scaffolding onto public places. And the quality of the netting, certainly once it was triple layered, gave this really nice effect of this white gauze, and so the whole set then became almost like a white gauze, and so that then gave me these interesting opportunities to be able to reveal parts of the structure that you wouldn't be able to see at other times. So Jan basically had almost given me a sort of what was like a white piece of paper to light, which is fantastic. The only part of the set that was strict within a colour template was obviously the floor, but even that owed itself to being able to pick up a lot of colour because of the black and white QR code on the floor as well. So from my point of view it was fantastic, because I knew that whatever colour I threw onto the set, it would take it. She had basically given me a very nice 3D blank canvas to work on, and Jan was very excited about seeing the lights. She wasn't too bothered about seeing the workings of the set, and it was quite obvious that it was made out of scaffolding, and we were never going to hide that in any kind of way. So therefore the scaffolding itself gave me lots of opportunities to be able to rig fixtures on the set itself, and so at no point were we disguising the fact that this was quite an industrial sort of technical set. So it was good from that point of view.
One of the things that Jambi provided for us relatively early on was a model.
Yes.
Absolutely to scale, fitting in within the space, which certainly helped all sorts of people be able to sort of see what it might become.
Yeah.
But obviously, I think for the most important thing was give you something that you could play with beforehand. I mean, can you talk us through like how you used that model and why it was useful?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the model box is crucial really for a production, and certainly from the design point of view. It allows you to be able to put yourself in a position of being a fixture, like a lantern, and being able to look through the model and see whether this would be a good place to place lanterns. I had the model box for some time where I was able to take photographs of each of the individual scenes. So with that I was able to get what we call a birdie, which is a small light, and be able to put this in different positions around the model box and see what sort of shadows, what sort of effect it was having through the gauze and so on and so forth. So I was able to basically create my lighting but within a 1:25 scale. It also gives me opportunity to change colour filters to see what sort of colours work on the set and so on and so forth. So it's such a useful tool to have. Obviously from my point, from a set constructor as well, it sort of enables me to look at the actual dynamics of how we're actually going to build this thing. It then enables you from that point from the model box, you can then transfer that to an actual scale drawing, and from those scale drawings you can then create plans, and so within those plans I'm then able to see all of the various configurations of where the periactoids were going to be, and then be able to make the choice of what lanterns are we going to use within a certain scene, and what parts of the set were going to be blocked and I wouldn't be able to light through, and so on and so forth. So yeah, it's wonderful to have that, quite frankly, I don't know how people would be able to to exist without one, really. So it was good.
You talk about going scene by scene, and
Yes.
obviously one of the challenges any play, particularly someone as dense in a way as the Dutch Courtesan, with a huge variety of scenes and locations, and all of them not only distinct within themselves, but needing to conjure certain, immediately conjure sort of a sense of place of what's going on. And you were saying you worked with Mike from early stage of that. Can you talk a bit about
Sure. I mean,
what you did there?
We worked very closely with Mike in terms of not only from a lighting design point of view, but from a production manager point of view. We're looking at the scene by scene, how we're going to create a different environment for each of the scenes, and I think we worked it out that in total, with consultation with Jan B, when we went through the original model box in Scarborough, I think we came out at about 17 different scenes for the whole production, and within those 17 scenes the periactoids moved almost every single time. But as the course of the build happens, and the enormity of the periactoids, especially the downstage left and downstage right ones, they suddenly start to throw in a new dynamic, which suddenly you think, oh, actually, to move this 17 times, this is now going to be a little bit awkward. And Mike also, through rehearsal, suddenly realised that there was a transition that he needed from scene to scene to be a lot quicker. We couldn't pause and have an interlude of music and then wait for 30 seconds to a minute to change the scenes and then go into the next one. Some of them had to be quite quick. So we sort of went back to the drawing board again and basically looked at being able to do less scene changes, but create the same 17 different scenes, but try to do that a lot more through light. So we then basically look at the locations. Quite a lot of the exterior locations happened at night, and the interior locations I think we were able to pin down to maybe 4 or 5 locations. So once you've got that, you can then start to sort of piece together this is the colour palette I'm going to use for this particular location, this is what I'm going to use for this one, and so on and so forth. And it was then just a matter of just going from place to place. Some of the locations would have had a slight different deviation in terms of how the periaptoid moved, but the choice of colour, I think, was the obvious choice, which would always tell someone, okay, we're back in this location. So we sort of looked quite carefully at the characters, how obvious we were going to be, for example, in the well, I don't know, let's be crass and call it the brothel. You know, do you go with an absolute seedy red, and we did have this almost tongue-in-cheek moment where it was a very neutral scene, and then there's the clap of the hand, and then suddenly it changes to this red scene. But I went with a bit of blue in there, and it wasn't so obvious that's what it was. But you know, that blue and red then sort of later on, when we go back to that, works fantastic when you see the two girls in a blue and a red costume and everything.
Yeah.
So there were nice little touches like that, and I think colour was one of those things that we sort of tried to tie in as much with the feel of how that was at the time.
Obviously, anytime you're using light to such an extent, you're going to need a lot of equipment. And one of the things I noticed when I took photos during the dress rehearsal, and it's one of the even in dark scenes, one of the most amount of light there that I've ever had to deal with taking photos. But I was wondering, I mean, this is the second sort of full-scale production that we've done on this stage,
Yes.
the last being Mad World by Masters.
Yeah.
And obviously they're very different in terms of the not only the set but also the level of equipment that you were able to use, or you did use.
Yeah.
And so I think this time you were trying to go for using one of everything, but at least one of everything. But
Yeah, absolutely. I think once I'd sort of once I knew I was definitely sort of lighting the show, I set myself a challenge, which was basically to use one of each type of lantern or fixture that we have in the building. I think I failed. I think there were probably about 2 or 3 particular pieces of equipment that I couldn't use, and that was in the end due to time. And but in the end, I think I worked it out that there was something like 25 different types of lantern or fixture that was used, comprising of anything like a generic theatre lantern, whether it be a profile or a Fresnel, to moving lights, to LEDs, to fluorescent tubes. So that was fun. It was logistically it was a bit of a nightmare because a lot of the intelligent fixtures require miles and miles of cable and quite a lot of pre-planning and pre-plotting on the lighting desk, and it was easier to do this time round, and the reason why I wasn't able to do it in Mad World was because of the time we moved in. There wasn't enough time for me to get my head round how those fixtures operated. So Mad World, though I still managed to use a fair few. That was Courtesan a year later, or 2 years later rather. I had a lot more experience with the desk, with the fixtures, what they could do. And so it just proved to be a challenge, but it was, I really enjoyed, and I'm never really a fan of using moving lights. I tend to try and keep everything as a fixed fixture, and everything has a purpose. But I think within this, because of the way the set moved, the moving lights actually became my sort of get out of jail card for quite a few scenes. It was quite tricky to light because in a thrust stage venue you have to almost treat it like lighting in the round. And from a lighting designer's point of view, when you light the show, you always light it from the front, and you light it from the best seat in the house, which is right in front of the stalls, somewhere down the middle. and then suddenly you have this beautiful scene that you've lit, and then you sort of walk around and sit in another seat, and you realise that the scene looks totally different. So what I then set myself another challenge, which was to try to create as best as possible the view that you get from the front would be exactly the same as what you would get from the sides, and so on and so forth. Obviously you can't complete that in terms of that, but the set unfortunately cannot move round to the sides because then it's blocking the view. But certainly from whatever character was stood on the forestage, wherever they stood, the same view was accomplished from any part of the auditorium. And again, that was through having an understanding, 2 years of understanding of what lights did, and using many fixtures to be able to sort of solve those particular problems.
Yeah. Great.
Right.
Well, hopefully then in a year or so's time we'll be able to get everything up there.
Absolutely, we'll put 400 lights up.
Yeah. Rob, thank you very much.
Okay, it's a pleasure. Cheers.